Okay, let's begin. We are on Daf Bet Amud Aleph. We're starting with the Gemara. If you're following in the art scroll, that would be 2A2. So just to do a quick review of the Mishnah, 1 minute before we begin the Gemara, so it's fresh in our minds. The Mishnah begins by telling us that you could water a field, bet shilachin, a field that is an irrigated field, which means it doesn't have enough rainwater to be able to sustain itself. Moed on Chol HaMoed. Ubashivit and on Shemitah as well. Ben Mayan sheyatzah b'techila, whether it's a newly opened spring or Mayan sheyatzah b'techila, or an old spring. But from well water or anything you're going to have to do, which is more manual, that's going to be exertion, and that we're not going to allow you to do. So we're seeing that we're only allowing you to do something which is no exertion, and as well is davar ha'aved, something which is going to be not a loss of profit, but something which is going to be a loss of what you already have, a loss of principle, shall we say. Okay? The Mishnah also adds that you can't make an irrigation ditch around the vines. That's also excessive work. You can't make this pathway for the water 1 amah wide, 1 amah deep, in order to bring water. You can't build a new one on Chol HaMoed, and as well on Shemitah, because the Gemara we already know why Moed is not going to work, because it's a lot of work, and you're not allowed to do work on Chol HaMoed, which is intensive. And on Shibi'it, you can't do it on Shemitah. The Gemara already said, we discussed what the problem is, and we'll get back to that when we get to there on Daf Dalet. Mitaknin etam kukalot, the Mishnah continues, Chachamim omrim, osin ta'amat techila b'Shibi'it. No, on Shibi'it, there's no Isur on watering your field, and there's no Isur on doing excessive work. So on Shemitah, you should be allowed to build a canal, to irrigate the field. The Mishnah ends by giving us a bunch of different things, which are considered to be tzorchei rabim, the needs of the masses. What is that? You could fix wells. In Reshut Rabim, you're allowed to, clean them out from the mud that has fallen into the water to dirty it. You can fix the streets, and places that are ritual baths that you need to fill the mikveh or to fix it. We'll do anything that the public need. We'll identify the kivarot by pouring lime on them, so that people know what to avoid in order to remain pure. And we will send out our emissaries to go out and pull the weeds on Chol HaMoed as well. So that is the Mishnah in a nutshell. Let us begin with the Gemara. Gemara says, Hashta, 1 second. Yesh lomar. If you tell me that a new mayan, a new ditch, spring, which is new, where the worry of a new spring is that the walls are not yet solidified and they might collapse in on themselves, which will require a lot of work to be able to reinstate them. If you told me you're allowed to use a spring like that, isn't it obvious? An older Ma'ayan that is not newly formed, which is not going to collapse. Mibaya didn't need to even tell me. It's obvious. If you could do it with that, where there's a worry, you for sure could do it in a scenario where there's nothing to worry about. The Gemara answers, Itzrich, we needed to tell you a new spring and an old spring. We need to tell you both. Why? And this is very important, okay? Whenever the Mishnah says something, we always look not only at what the Mishnah says, but also what it doesn't say. So as much as what the Mishnah does say is important, so too is what it does not say. So if the Mishnah would have only said to you the bigger chidush, which is a new spring which might fall, but it didn't specify an old spring, what would happen then? Mibaye amri itzrich, I needed it because if you told me a new spring I was allowed to use, maybe that if it would say our Mishnah exactly as it says, that you could water an irrigated field with a newly formed spring, you know what I might think? That I can only water an irrigated field with a newly dug spring. But a field that is not irrigated, in other words, a field that gets its water by rainwater, maybe I'm even allowed to use an old spring, because since it's not going to collapse, I could water whatever I want with it. Therefore, the Mishnah is coming to tell you, the Mishnah is coming to teach us that both a new spring and an old spring could only be used on an irrigated field, and a field that does not need irrigation, you can't use, no matter what kind of spring it is, you can never water a field that does not need that extra irrigation. Why? Because it's only an issue of profit, but not an issue of loss.
Can you one more time that one with the new spring and old spring?
If the Mishnah would say you're allowed to water a irrigated field with a newly formed spring, you know what I would say? The reason why it tells me only an irrigated field is because we're talking about a newly formed spring. If I had an old spring, I would even be able to water a field that's not irrigated, a regular rainwater field. And that would be untrue, that halakha. So you're leaving yourself open by omission for someone to learn the wrong halakha. So therefore the Mishnah, to be safe, told you, new spring, old spring, can only be used on an irrigated field where there's an issue of loss, because it's not going to have enough water. But a field which has enough water just by the rainwater that it gets, you're never allowed to use water of any sort in order to be able to water it on Chol HaMoed. The Gemara continues. A new spring is defined by a amount of time within which it is not yet solidified, where you're worried about the walls collapsing. Okay? Now, obviously, it's a good question. I would add to that, it would probably actually depend on the type of soil that is specific to that topography. Because, as an example, when I lived in London, I hate to go to a morbid place, but when they would bury people, you do not understand what it's like to dig in the soil. It's clay. So you're sitting there, it's like digging in Play-Doh. It's unbelievable. So you're sweating your head off, and all you dug was this much. When you have loose, sandy earth, it's much easier. So depending on the type of earth is going to be a length of time that it takes to solidify the walls. In that clay earth, after 2 minutes, it's already solid. Okay? Let's continue. The Mishnah, the Gemara says as follows. But an old spring, which is not going to collapse, I would think you could use, even by a non-irrigated field. No, loshna, it doesn't matter. A older one. Or it doesn't matter, a newer one. Beta shlachin in an irrigated field, yes. Beta baal, a field that gets water from the rain, is never allowed to be watered. Umay mashma, the Gemara says, where do you get these words from? Irrigated field is shlachin, and a rainwater field is baal. What do those words have to do with what you're trying to communicate? The Gemara is now going to show us that the Aramaic for each of these words corresponds, or the Torah version of each of these words corresponds to the concept that we're trying to communicate, with a field that is irrigated, that has water, that is satisfied with what it has. It doesn't need to look elsewhere, or a field that does need to look elsewhere because the rainwater is not enough. So let's see, where do we find the example of those words being used? The Gemara says, Lishna de tzachut. How do you know beta shelachin means a field which is tzachut? It's dry, it needs to drink. Because it says, Ve'ata ayef v'yagea. Anyone remember where that is? Nope. But ironically, you're very close. Because it's his great-great-grandson.
Soup nuts.
When we were walking through, they wouldn't give us the water after the midbar.
No. So close. But you said that. You're saying it right, but getting it wrong. Well, it's not Esav, but it's Esav's grandson. Who's Esav's grandson? Amalek. You said Amalek, but then you gave the example of the Ammoni and Moavi. Amalek, they attacked the Jewish people. And the Pasuk says, when they attacked you, right? Right? So it says, Ata ayef v'yagea. You are, ayef means usually tired. Yagea means that you have no more strength left. Says the Gemara, umitargeminan, and the translation is ve'at mishalhi v'la'i. And you are mishalhi v'la'i. Mishalhi is the translation in Aramaic, in the in the little column on the side over there, you have unkelis. Unkelis translates into Aramaic. The word ayef, which means tired, is translated as shalhi. Faint from, what were they tired from? Were they too much time in the Peloton? Shalhi over there is that they had not had to drink. Okay? Umay mashma. So therefore, shalhi and shalhin are very similar. Hay and chet are interchangeable oftentimes in language. So shalhin means a field which is weak from thirst. Okay. The Gemara says, "Umay mashma dahai bet habal lishna." How do I know that bet habal is a language which expresses dimiyatvuta, which means that it is settled, it has enough where it is, it doesn't need to go outside to get anything that it needs, i.e., the rainwater is enough, it doesn't need to be irrigated. You don't mind shutting the door? Sorry. Dichtiv, because the pasuk says, "Ki yiv'al bachur betula." Now, just every time we're going to see a pasuk, we have the whole pasuk. Any pasuk that's quoted is in the inside column. You see over there? It says Torah or Hashalem. You see that? Yeah? So the second pasuk says, that's the whole pasuk. Pasuk in Yeshaya. When a young man is together with, lives with a betula, a virgin. Just like a young man is marrying or getting together with a young virgin, Yiva'alucha banaich. Your children will will be together with you. Okay, ba'alucha means baal is from an expression of a baal, husband, right? So when a man and a woman are together in a intimate setting, that's called yiva'alucha. But over here we're talking about the land of Israel. So like a young man is together with his new young wife, so too will your children, i.e., the land of Israel, will come and they will be with you. What is it trying to say? Yiva'alucha, says the Gemara. So what do you see? Umitargiminan, and the translation in the Targum on Yiva'alucha is ara kemadi mitutav olam im betulta, like a young man is settled with a virgin, with a young, a woman who's never been with anyone before. Yityatvun begavech banaich. Your children will be settled in you. What does that mean? A young man can't be settled if the woman is not a virgin? What is it saying? I think the idea is that when someone has a wife, he's never been with anybody else, so his attention is only with her. He's not looking, it's not like he married someone older than him, he's looking for someone younger, so his attention is somewhere else. He has everything he needs in his house, okay? Because he married someone that had never been married before. So too, the land of Israel, the pasuk is saying, they'll be with you, they're not going to think of any other lands. Jews won't want to leave Israel, that's what the pasuk was saying. They'll be settled in you. So too, also a field, which is bet habal, means that the field has everything it needs already inside of it. It's settled. It doesn't need you to bring water from somewhere else. It's a field which is able to be sustained by the rain that it gets. Okay? So that's a little diversion in the Gemara telling you how we got to the words shlachin to mean a thirsty field, and baal to mean a field that has everything it needs. By the way, a little aside here. What do you see? You see that the word baal, which means husband, is defined as being someone that provides everything that your wife, your spouse, needs from you. That's the definition of baal, of a husband, is that the person that you're with is providing everything that you need for you, that you're satisfied, you don't have to go anywhere else for that. The Gemara says, now we're going to ask a question that the Gemara always asks, okay? Now sometimes this can be a little bit challenging to follow. So let me structure it for you, and then we'll plug the Gemara into the structure, okay? A lot of times we'll have a Mishnah, and the Mishnah doesn't say any names in the beginning. It just tells you, you water a field that's irrigated, you're allowed to water. Who's talking? Who's this guy? Who is this disembodied voice of the Mishnah? So the Gemara will say, who is the Tana of this Mishnah? And then the Gemara will say, maybe it's this rabbi. And the Gemara is like, no, but he doesn't say that, because he says something else, a little bit different than what our Mishnah says. Well, he says 80% of what you said, but 20% is different, so it can't be him either. So who's this voice? So that's the process that the Gemara often uses when it asks who is the Tana of our Mishnah. So who is this Mishnah? Now, what are we looking for? Let's remember. We have two principles that are key. The first principle is that the only thing that you can water is davar aved. The only thing you're allowed to do on Chol Moed is something which is going to otherwise be a loss, but not for profit. Okay? The second thing is that you're only allowed to do that thing to save from irretrievable loss, only when it's not excessive effort. Okay? Let's say you found a rabbi that says, I hold that you're allowed to do anything which is a irretrievable loss, no matter how much effort. Could that be the Mishnah? No. How about if you found a rabbi that says, you know what's asur on Chol Moed? Excessive effort. But if it's not excessive effort, fadal. Also can't be, because our Mishnah doesn't let you have a blank check when it's not an effort. Only when it's not an effort and it's to avoid an irretrievable loss and not for profit. So we need to satisfy both of those clauses in order for this Mishnah and for the rabbi that we want to be the rabbi of this Mishnah to be a good fit. Question?
Sorry, this might be a bit of a silly question. But
No questions are silly.
if the Mishnah doesn't actually give the name of a rabbi, what is it really? Wouldn't there be a reason as to why that name wasn't given? Why is it so necessary that we find the actual name?
It's a very good question.
Why does it matter who the rabbi is?
It's a very good question. So let me give you a simple example.
You're talking about reference.
He's asking, why do we need to know?
What does it matter who the
If it was important, the Mishnah would have told you. If it doesn't say, why do we care?
That's the thing. Right.
Like when I stand up and I say the halakha, I tell you, the halakha is like this. Did I tell you which rabbi said that that's how? Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. The answer is, let's say I'm going to tell you that the rabbi that says this, his name is Rabbi David. But then I find another Mishnah, here, some of the other books, Rabbi David gives a qualification. Now, all of a sudden, whatever he says over there is also going to be true about our Mishnah. Because it's him who's talking.
Well, you mean it gives him like authority?
No,
Gives him the authority?
it's not the authority. If this is his opinion, but elsewhere I find that his opinion gives another condition, then I know that this Mishnah is not arguing with him. It's just didn't give you all the information. So then adding that in would change the halakha. However, if it was not him, the Zoom just ended.
Just ended it by accident.
Okay, what do we do? Just join the meeting again?
Yeah, join again.
They may have to add the codes and things.
Meeting, is it Masechet Megillah
Yeah.
class? Okay, it's okay.
Harry's face when you click the button.
Meeting password?
I don't know. Maybe if we go back out to the WhatsApp and you restart it, I'll go back in.
Okay, I'll try that.
It was pinned at the top.
Pinned at the top. Waiting. Technology is unbelievable, huh? Still waiting.
It's because the Wi-Fi is not so unbelievable.
We got to sort this out, by the way. Let's try that again. Wi-Fi. Okay, and we are live.
Recording in progress.
Okay, we're live. Start meeting. Unmute. Okay. Participants 9 already. How'd they join back? Maybe because I just left. That's why, because I just left. Okay, we're back on. Could you hear me?
It dumped the whole thing. We all just came back on.
Oh, you came back. That was very fast. Okay, I was the slowest one to get back on the Zoom. All right, let's continue. So now we're trying to figure out who it is. Why? Because if we know who it is, and then they give us some other condition. You know what? I'll give you an example. Let's say there's a law, and it's American law that there was a certain law in taxes. Now, I happen to know that there's another law in American taxes that says that if you just do this, then you're not obligated to pay taxes for that thing. Since this is American law, that's American law, the two things complement each other. But if one is American taxes and one is English taxes, the fact that the Americans absolve you from taxes in this scenario doesn't change anything because the English, because it's coming from a different origin source. So that's why it's important for us to know who the Mishnah actually is. Okay, so the Mishnah, the Gemara is now going to try and figure it out. Just to be clear, just for those of you that are joining the Gemara class now, there's a status of a Mishnah and Gemara. Mishnah is by the time of Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi. That's roughly the end of the Second Temple, okay, that era. The Gemara is only hundreds of years later, okay? Gemara can never argue on Mishnah. because it's like a categorically higher rabbi, because they're earlier in history, okay? A Mishnah has a parallel, same time, same rabbis, that's called a Breita, okay? What's the Breita? What's a Mishnah and a Breita? Imagine at the same time, they're deciding to compile the Mishnayot. So Rabbi Yehuda and Nasi said, okay, I'm going to take this version of the text that I have. This is the one that's going to make it into the Mishnah. Here, they had another version of the same Mishnah, almost identical, maybe 2 words different. Okay, sometimes that will make a difference in halakha. They're equally valid in terms of establishing an opinion of a Tana, okay? And they're equally valid that the Gemara can't argue on them. But the Braitot were not as well known because they weren't codified like the Mishnah. So for everyone clear? Okay. Says the Gemara. What?
That's so interesting.
Yeah. Says the Gemara. The Gemara says.
So you always know who the rabbi is? They always tell you? Or not?
Almost always. Yeah. Almost always. Yeah. There's also there's general rules. One of the general rules is
Who's the guy?
Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir. So if you just have a Mishnah with no name on it, usually it's Rabbi Meir. Okay? Ask me a question, James.
Why can't we just assume that?
Why can't we just assume it's Rabbi Meir? There you go. Are you ready? Rabbi Engines, gentlemen. Okay? Says the Gemara, who is the opinion of the Mishnah? My Tana. Who is the Tana? The psedain, which means a loss, yes, you're allowed to break chol hamoed for. Harvacha, profit, lo, no. Ve'afilu b'makom pseda. And the second thing he has to hold is that even when there's an irretrievable loss, mitrachna milo tarchinan, you're not allowed to do extra effort. Who is that? Amar Rav Huna said, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. It's the opinion of the Tana, Rabbi Eliezer, the son of Yaakov. The Tanan, we learned in the Braita, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says, Moshchin et hamayim me'ilan le'ilan. If you have one tree and there's water coming to that one tree. Now that tree has enough water. I need to take that water from tree number 1 to tree number 2. You're allowed to do that, says Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov on Chol Hamoed. Ubilvad shelo yashke et hasadeh kula. The only thing you have to make sure is that when you're kicking with your foot, you're kind of making a little groove in the earth to let the water flow from one place to the other. You're not taking it past other parts of field. Kula doesn't mean that you can't water the whole field. It means that you can't water the regular parts of the field. Why? The trees, right, in this scenario, they need to have much more water. So you have a tree that's not getting enough water, and it's a loss. I'm allowed to drag from one tree to the other, but I can't pull it across the field. Why? Because the field has enough water, as is, from the rain. So it's not it's not loss, it's profit. So that's the opinion of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov. Okay? So you see that he fits with the opinion of the Mishnah. Why? Because he says that you could only have it for loss and not for profit. The Gemara says, what do you mean? That only tells you one. I see from those words of Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, Rabbi Eliezer harvacha delo harvacha. You see that Rabbi Eliezer holds harvacha delo, that you can't do it for profit because he doesn't let you water the field on the way from tree A to tree B. Tircha b'makom pseda mishametle. To drag your foot from one tree to the other, that's not an excessive amount of effort. So I don't know what Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov holds with regards to effort. Now, let me just hit pause for 1 second. This does not mean that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov can't be the Mishnah. We just don't have enough information. So if you find that Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov says point 1 out of 2 points, could you automatically say that the Mishnah is him? No. You only know that he has one of the conditions, okay? But the Gemara tried to bring it as a proof. The Gemara answered that in that scenario, that's not enough tircha. That's not enough. He hasn't told us anything about whether excessive effort in a place of loss would still be forbidden. Ela Amar Rav Papa said, Hamani, who is it? Rabbi Yehudahi. This is the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. The Tanya we learned in the Braita. The Braita says, Ma'ayan hayotze b'techila. If you have a spring that is newly formed, mashkin mimenu, you're allowed to feed from that newly formed spring, afilu sadeh be'taba'al. Even a field that gets enough water from rainwater. Divrei Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Meir. Rabbi Meir says you could water any kind of field with a new spring.
Rabbi Yehuda said that?
Rabbi Meir. Automatically, immediately, what do we know? That Rabbi Meir is contradicting the Mishnah. So even if automatically we would normally say Stam Mishnah Rabbi Meir, when Rabbi Meir definitively says exactly the opposite of what it says in the Mishnah, it can't be him. That's why we're asking the question. Okay?
That's why we asked that first, no?
Sorry?
Wouldn't we outrule him first of all people?
No, because it's not a hard, fast rule. It's when we don't know who it is, you could normally assume it's Rabbi Meir. Why? By the way, my rabbi taught me this. After many years of knowing this law, I never knew the reason why. My rabbi brought us a piece of from the Chida. Rabbi Chaim Yosef David Azulai was a genius, a Sephardic traveler, world traveler. Okay, the Chida writes that the reason why Rabbi Yehuda chose Rabbi Meir on a prevalent basis to be the mouthpiece of the Mishnah is because the language he spoke in a very clear way, and therefore he, of all the people, had the easiest route to be able to quote, because you didn't need to fix things or change things. He had a good way of speaking. So therefore Rabbi Meir was the one that is generally quoted. But obviously when Rabbi Meir tells you the opposite of the Mishnah, you know it's not him, okay? So Rabbi Meir says you could feed any kind of field, and even from a spring that's a new spring, okay? What does that tell you? That Rabbi Meir holds that you're allowed to give water even for profit.
Why is he differentiating the new spring when we already said that the new and the old are okay?
Excellent question. Boom! Okay, we're going to see, the Gemara is going to answer exactly that question in a minute. Okay? But we know Rabbi Meir is not the Mishnah. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, okay, could it be Rabbi Yehuda now? He already told us, he already tipped out his hand. He said it's Rabbi Yehuda. So, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Rabbi Yehuda says, En mashkin, ela sadeh bet hashilachin. No. You can't feed a rainwater field. That's profit. It has enough from the rain. You could only use a field, sadeh bet hashilachin, an irrigated field, shechareva, which has dried up. He added a word there. We didn't have that in the Mishnah, though.
Is that beyond loss already?
He says chareva.
Desperate, maybe.
What does that mean? It sounds like extra loss. What does that mean? We'll come back to it, okay? But at least he fits us on shelachin, on the field that's only irrigated could you water. Rabbi Eliezer ben Azariah says, lo kach velo kach. Not this and not this. You're not right and you're not right. Al ken, yeter al ken, amar Rabbi Yehuda. More than this did Rabbi Yehuda say. Lo yifaneh adam amat hamayim, if you have a water channel which has become clogged up, and I want to either clean it out or divert it v'yashke. A person is not allowed to do that. V'yashke leginato u'lechurvato b'cholo shal moed. A person can't clean out a channel of water or divert that channel of water to his gina, which means a garden, or chareva, which means if you had a house and you knocked it down and then you planted in that spot. Both of those places, a garden and a newly established field, they need much more water to be able to survive. So a garden more than a field, and a newly established field used to have a house on it. In other words, it hasn't been used for agriculture. Both of those are desperate for water. Says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah in the name of Rabbi Yehuda, you're still not allowed to divert water from a amat hamayim into that place. What are we seeing? We're seeing exactly, Mom is calling, but I think that stops the Zoom.
Oh,
And then accept?
3 o'clock in Israel. That's on you, Rabbi.
Hi, Mom. You're in the middle of a shiur, but your son said it's very early in the morning, so maybe it's an emergency.
Hi, Rabbi, how are you?
Everybody say hi. Okay.
Bye, Mom. I'll call you right back. I'll call you right back.
Very.
Bye, Mom.
You called it. Okay.
God bless. All right.
Good meal. All right, I'm out, boys.
He'll call you right back after the shiur. Back to you after these messages.
It's on YouTube for later, right? Please don't cut the YouTube.
What the heck is going on? Okay. Yeah, there we go. We forgot to do the do not disturb. Okay. The guys on Zoom are like, what is happening? Okay, guys, what you missed was just that Taveri is amazing. Okay. Sorry, Mechila. Okay, so the Gemara says, what did it just tell you? Rabbi Yehuda said you could only water a beta shlachin. Okay? Is that effort? No, it was, you have a new spring. It's on the way. No problem. So that tells you that you're allowed to do it only for loss. That's what he establishes. But then Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, wait, Rabbi Yehuda said more than that. You know what Rabbi Yehuda added? He also said that you're not allowed to do diversion of the amat hamayim into the field that needs it the most. So you see that he holds even in the case of loss, if it's too much effort, we're not going to allow you to do it. So now we have an opinion of Rabbi Yehuda that gives us both loss as the condition and as well not too much effort as a condition. Okay. So the Gemara says as follows.
But it's not tircha yetera, right? Because it's
What's not tircha yetera?
watering a gina or a...
No. So from a ma'ayan, no. But to clear out a amat hamayim, yes. Remember, what's the ma'ayan? You have the ma'ayan flowing. I just draw a line with my foot in the sand from the ma'ayan to the tree. No problem. Here, it's the amat hamayim has gotten clogged. So I'm now diverting the amat hamayim. Or I'm cleaning out everything that's in the amat hamayim. That's extra work. Right? So you would be allowed to put a ma'ayan to a beta shlachin, and even more so to a gina or a charava. Okay? Or churva. So now we have established Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Now we're like, okay, brilliant. These two things match exactly the Mishnah. It's the Gemara. My charava. What does it mean that you're allowed to divert, that you're not allowed to divert the ama even for charava, for a field that's destroyed, okay? Or beta shlachin shecharva, that you're allowed to divert a ma'ayan to the irrigated field shechareva, that's destroyed. The Gemara says, what do you mean destroyed? If it's destroyed, there's nothing there. You can't water nothing, right? So it must be it's not really destroyed. Amar Abaye answers, Abaye says as follows. We've actually touched on this earlier. If you have seeds in the ground and you don't water them, what happens to the seeds? Nothing. They're just there. If it gets watered and the seeds sprout, and then you don't water them, what happens to the seeds? They die.
Right.
So therefore, says the Gemara, adds that word chareva, that if you have a bet shlachin, you have an irrigated field that was once getting water, so it started growing, and now it stopped, I'm allowed to direct the ma'ayan. But if it did not start growing, then it's not an irretrievable loss, so therefore you would not be able to do it. Says the Gemara. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, Lo kach v'lo kach. Lo shna charev mayana, ve'lo shna lo charev mayana. Mayan shiatza v'techila lo, mayan, a new mayan, no. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, what is he saying? Not like this, not like this. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah is saying, no. Not a bet shlachin, not the other field. Because you're talking about a new ma'ayan. A new ma'ayan can never be used.
What's the other field that's not shalachim? Baal?
Baal. Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah says, that's not the point here. The point is not what kind of field it is. The point is that it's a new ma'ayan. Why? What do we say we were worried about? When you have a new spring, the wall's collapsing. What's Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah worried about? Excess effort. He doesn't care about loss. He cares about excess effort. So Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah cares about effort, but he doesn't care about loss. Because he tells you that you're able to water even a field that's a rainwater field from an old spring. So it's not Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. It's not Rabbi Meir, because Rabbi Meir says you can use whatever ma'ayan you want. What makes a difference is whether it's a field. So Rabbi Elazar, whether it's...
Didn't he say the first one? Rabbi Elazar said the tree to tree, but not excess into the field. So he said you were allowed tree to tree.
Sorry?
Didn't Rabbi Eliezer say you were allowed to divert from tree to tree?
Yeah, where are you going? Yeah?
So, but you weren't allowed to do it into the field. So
No, that's Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov.
Oh.
This is different. This is Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah.
Sorry.
Okay? So, So we have one opinion that says one, the other opinion says the other. The only one that says two is the middle rabbi, Rabbi Yehuda. Now we know Rabbi Yehuda is the Baal Ma'amar of our Mishnah. Now the Gemara says, Umimai, how do you know that this is what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah holds? Dilma, Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda. This is Rabbi Yehuda holds. How do you know that Rabbi Yehuda is the rabbi of our Mishnah? Maybe Ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda bet hashilachin in bet haba'alo ela ma'ayan shiatza b'techila, a ma'ayan that came out in the beginning. Let's go back to what Joe asked earlier. According to Rabbi Yehuda, if Rabbi Yehuda is like the rabbi of our Mishnah, what did the rabbi of our Mishnah say about springs? Does he care if it's new or old? So over here, in this Mishnah that you just brought me, it's only talking about a new spring. So Rabbi Yehuda, when he then argues, seems like he's only arguing on a new spring. So maybe Dilma ad kan lo ka'amar Rabbi Yehuda bet hashilachin in bet haba'alo. Maybe the differentiation of new, of irrigated versus non-irrigated for Rabbi Yehuda is ela ma'ayan she'yatza b'techila, in a new ma'ayan. But when it comes to Dilma atilim pule, because he's worried about the wall collapsing, we turned on to bet amud bet at the top. Aval ma'ayan shelo yatza b'techila, but a old spring de lo atilim pule, we're not worried about the walls collapsing. Afilu bet habal nami, maybe he would hold that you're able to irrigate even a rainwater field. And what would that do? That would mean Rabbi Yehuda does not match our Mishnah. The Gemara says, Im ken matnitan aman termayeh. Who are you going to apply our Mishnah to? Does everyone understand what we just did? We established that the Mishnah is Rabbi Yehuda. And we explained why he says both opinions. The Gemara asks Joe's question. 1 second. If it's really Rabbi Yehuda holds what he holds on both kinds of springs, not only on a new one. So if it says it by a new one, maybe this Rabbi Yehuda actually disagrees with the Mishnah. And he only allows, in a case, he only does not allow you to give this water to the field in a new spring, because he's worried about the collapsing of the wall.
And then it's not his Mishnah.
But then it's not his Mishnah. The Gemara says, that's a good point, that maybe you could read Rabbi Yehuda that way in this other Mishnah. However, and this is the second answer to your question, James, right? Since now we have an unidentified Mishnah, and the only rabbi that it fits with, not Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, not Rabbi Meir, not Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov, it only fits with Rabbi Yehuda. That means that the only person this Mishnah could be is Rabbi Yehuda. So then let this Mishnah tell you what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is in the other Mishnah. You got it? Since it can't be anybody else, it's got to be him. So our Mishnah sheds light on that Mishnah that Rabbi Yehuda meant his halakha by new springs and old springs.
So that's just,
If so,
he's referring to all springs.
all springs.
He's saying new spring. Because
So,
it's his Mishnah
so
that
why is he
says
saying?
old spring.
So why is he saying a new spring then? If he means both, Gemara answers because we didn't start with Rabbi Yehuda. Who do we start with in the Mishnah? We started with the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Go back. Rabbi Meir is saying, Rabbi Meir is telling you his biggest chidush, that you can water whichever field you want, even with a new spring that you're worried about falling, you can even do that. So lehodi'acha, to teach you, kocho de Rabbi Meir, to teach you the strength of Rabbi Meir, we gave you the biggest chidush, i.e. the new spring, but really we mean both of them. Rabbi Yehuda matches his opinion in the Mishnah. How come we said a new spring then? Rabbi Meir was telling you his hadush. So Rabbi Yehuda was just responding that even a new ma'ayan, you're even allowed to water a rain field. But Rabbi Yehuda was just arguing on him. But meanwhile, he holds his halakha with regards to either ma'ayan and only with regards to an irrigated field. Okay? So far, we've now established who the Mishnah is, and we've lived up to all of our explanations in the Mishnah thus far. Now the Gemara is going to take us on a little bit of a journey. This last piece is what we're going to cover until the end of this class. it's not going to take us back to where we need to get to immediately. But in order to get to the second part of the Mishnah, the Gemara needed to talk about the first part of the Mishnah. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little sojourn, okay, that's what the Gemara often does, into the laws of Shabbat, because the end of that conversation is going to be relevant to our Mishnah. So, says the Gemara, Itmar, we learned...
And we established that you could do both?
We established...
Okay, and all the rabbis agree that it's both?
No, each one disagrees. But our Mishnah says is Rabbi Yehuda, and our Mishnah is what Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Okay? Both springs, only in one field, the irrigated field. Okay. Itma, says the Gemara, Ham minachesh ve'ham mashke mayim lazirayim b'Shabbat. If someone pulls out, minachesh means a person that pulls out weeds. Ve'ham mashke mayim lazirayim b'Shabbat. Someone pours water on seeds on Shabbat. Mishum mayim matrinan be. What do we give him a warning for? Now, we need to back up for a minute. For those of you who learned Makot, please don't be bored, because we learned about this excessively in Masechet Makot, okay? But if you did not learn Masechet Makot, bear with me. The Torah tells us many times that a person can get a punishment, right? For doing a sin. But the only time you could punish someone, in any way, shape, or form, is when the person was fully aware that what they were doing was asur, and they were fully aware of the ramifications and punishment of their actions. So as an example, let's say I see Jack doing something wrong, and I don't want him to do it. I go in and I tell him, Jack, you're not allowed to do that. You know why? Because what you're doing on Shabbat is the law of planting, the law of painting, the law of writing, the law of whatever. Then if he says, and I tell him, you know, death penalty on Shabbat, you do Chilul Shabbat on purpose, knowing what you're doing, knowing the punishment. He goes there and does it anyway, then we punish him. But there's a very important thing that has to happen, and that is the warning. I can't give you a general warning. You can't tell the guy, hey, I can't do that. Mabby's here, no good. You got to tell him exactly the law that he's breaking. Let's say I tell you the wrong law, no punishment. Let's say you're writing, you're not allowed to write on Shabbat. Let's say you're writing, and I tell you, Shabbat, Asur, death penalty, no good. I have to tell you the specific law that you're breaking, okay? Otherwise, the guy's thinking, I don't know what he's talking about. Yeah, maybe it's allowed on Shabbat. It's only when you specifically address what the melacha is. One other piece you need to know.
So for somebody that doesn't know.
Yeah.
Sorry?
You're telling somebody that doesn't know.
You're a genius. You're a genius. No, we had cases of a Talmid Chacham does not need Hatra'ah. I said, Joe, you didn't even learn Makot, he's already figuring it out. Okay? Sophisticated thing. According to one opinion. Because one opinion says that warning is because you don't know. The other opinion is it's not because you don't know and you have to even warn a Talmid Chacham. But it's a machloket. Okay, exactly what you're talking about. Now, check this out. There's two things in Hilchot Shabbat. One is called Av. One is called Tolda. What's Av? What's Tolda? Av is a father. Tolda is like Toldot, is a child. Okay? Av is the 39 classic headline index items. So as an example, you have a law about, about tying, kosher. So what do you need in order to do kosher? You got to tie a knot on Shabbat, okay? Now what happens, I don't tie a knot on Shabbat. I take glue, I stick two things together. Did I tie anything? I didn't tie anything. But according to the Chachamim, the melacha of kosher is binding two things together. But that's not the Av, that's not the daddy. That's the child. That's the Tolda, okay? So when I'm warning you for a Tolda, I got to tell you, what you're doing, you think you're just gluing. But this is the Isur of kosher. So you got to tell the guy, the daddy melacha. Other opinions say you could do the Tolda, but what you definitely cannot do is get the wrong Av.
So you tell us one of the 39, not the
No good.
category?
You got to tell him which one of the 39.
Oh, wow.
Says the Gemara, Itmar. By the way, when you learn Makot and when you learn Sanhedrin, you realize how rare it was for anyone to get punished. Because there's so many hoops to jump through, right? In order for the guy to get punished, or for the guy to get killed, or for the guy to get malkut, right? And then if you hit him and the guy wets himself, he's patur. You know, the whip breaks, patur. Everything's happening. All right, fine. Itmar. Someone pulls out weeds, or he pours water on seeds on Shabbat. For what do we warn him? Rabba says we warn him because we say that pulling out weeds and watering the ground, what is it? Choresh. It's like plowing. What is plowing? Why is that plowing?
Uprooting the ground.
What do you do when you plow? You break up the earth. That's why you're plowing, so that the seed can be pushed into the earth and pushed deep. You want to make the soil loose. Both of those things, Mishum Choresh, that's what it's the son of Choresh. Rabbi Yosef says, no, Mishum Zorea. It's from planting, sowing. Why? Because when you plant, what do you need to do? You need to loosen up the earth. You need to water the earth so it's moist so that it will grow. So both of these are in aid of planting. Those are the two opinions. Okay? Great. Rabbah says one, Rabbi Yosef says the other. Amar Rabbah says, Kavati didi mistabra. I think that what I'm saying makes more sense. Ma darko shel choresh lirpuye ara. When you plow the earth, you make the ground softer. Hainami merpuye ara. Both of these things make the earth softer. Right? Water because it's moist, and plowing because you've broken up the clods of earth. Amar Rabbi Yosef says, Kavati didi mistabra. What I'm saying makes sense. You know why? Ma darko shel zorea isn't just like when you plant. Litzmuche pera, the purpose is in order to have a fruit grow. Hachanami, these two things also, matzmach pera, help the fruit grow. So each one of them said that the warning you give needs to be different. Rabbah says, you got to tell the guy, choresh, you're plowing. Rabbi Yosef says, you got to tell the guy, zorea, you're making it more easy for something to be planted. So the isur of Shabbat you're doing is planting. By the way, a lot of things like this. Let's say you have a plant on your Shabbat table. Take the plant, you move it to the window.
In the sun.
According to one opinion, what'd you do? You planted. Why? On the table, without the sunlight, can't grow. When you move it into the sunlight, you're literally, you're changing the condition of something so that it could grow. Let's say you have parched flower, a plant. Take water, pour it on. What am I doing? Zorea, growing. Even though I didn't actually I didn't take a seed, put it in the earth. But the source of the concept of Zorea is that, okay? So that's also the concept of a tolda. So those, each opinion holds, obviously, of the way, their own opinion. So Amar Abaya says, one second, Abaya said to Rabbah, one second, Lididcha kasha, I have a question on you, with Rabbi Yosef kasha, and I have a question on Rabbi Yosef. Lididcha kasha, I have a question on you, Mishum choresh in Mishum Zorea lo. You say that you got to warn the guy from Choresh. Let's say I said the guy Zorea. Did he not plant? Did he not create favorable conditions for planting? He did. So why am I not going to get him for that? Rabbi Yosef, same question. Mishum Zorea in, Mishum Choresh lo. If you warned for planting in, yes. And if you warned for plowing, no. Didn't he accomplish the softening of the earth that is conditional for Choresh? So you could do both. If you'll answer me, whenever you have two isurim, you can't do double jeopardy. You can only get me for one. And therefore, each opinion is choosing one because you can't choose both. Okay? Rav Kahana taught me a principle that stands in contradistinction to that. You can get for both. What's the case? Zomer v'tzarich le'etzim. Let's say I have a tree, and I prune one of the branches. Why do people prune branches from trees?
You get more growth.
Because you get more growth. But what happens if not only am I helping the tree grow, I also need that wood because I need to make a fire. So what did I do? Zomer v'tzarich le'etzim. I pruned and I happen to need the wood for firewood. Chayav shtayim. You're going to get two isurim. Echad mishum notea, one because of planting, because when you cut it, helps it grow. Ve'echad mishum kotzer, and one because of kotzer, because of cutting something down. By the way, neither opinion said that the weed puller is because of kotzer, which means to cut. Why not? Because in every case of kotzer, you need the object you're cutting. So let's say I have wheat. I cut my wheat. Kotzer, I cut the wheat. That's kotzer. That's literally what it means. How come no one says that when you pull weeds out, kotzer? Because I'm throwing the weeds out. Okay? The only time it's kotzer is when you're using the object, you're benefiting. When you're doing it and you're just pulling it out to throw it away, not kotzer. So, Rav Kahana told us, if you needed both, you got both isurim. So if you see that you could get two for one object, so therefore in this case, we should also have told you that you could do Zorea, Rav Yosef, and Choresh, Rabbah. Why'd you cut the other guy out? The Gemara answers, Kashya, it's a question, meaning that we should not be agreeing with Rabbi Yosef and Rabbah, we should actually be saying both of them. So in other words, if you did one or the other, both good. That's what Abaye is saying. Now let me just...
And that ties into the other Mishnah?
Not yet. This was just a setup. The question is going to begin etbe, where we're going to pick up from next week.
And then it goes back.
And then we're going to go back to the question on the Mishnah. Hold on. Just let me end with this. Why does Rabbah and Rabbi Yosef argue? What are they arguing in? Tosafot explains that one of them is saying, yeah, both agree the earth is getting softer. The other guy, the earth, it is getting, water from, it is getting, so why do they argue with each other? Tosafot explains that we have to look at, each one agrees that both things are happening. Rabbah says, I look at Choresh, you know why? Because if I have to choose one, which one is the immediate effect that I'm seeing? When I plowed, I didn't plant yet. So I'm not seeing that happen right now. So Choresh, I saw right now. Rav Yosef says, true, I get it. It's more immediate in terms of the action. But what is his intention here when he's plowing and when he's watering? Not to plow or water, to grow. So Rav Yosef is following his intention and Rabbah's following his action. Okay? So that's the idea of why each one is following each opinion. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen ve'amen.